40 years ago, the gruesome crime spree terrorized Atlanta.
Do you know where your children are?
When did you first start getting scared that he might be the next child?
Today, Atlanta's mayor announced police will begin reviewing evidence using more advanced DNA technology.
I'm also hopeful that people will see this and that the impact will be, we can never let this happen again.
Black Americans have indeed gone through great journeys of pain, of terror, unimaginable suffering, occurring from diverse degrees and unrelenting dimensions that one would least expect. But the unalivings of black children and teenagers some time ago in Atlanta, capital of Georgia, is one of the gut-wrenching tales amongst black history, so heart-stopping that every thinking mind who has heard about it couldn't help but wondered why. It all started on July the 28th, 1979, a hot summer day in Atlanta, Georgia. A woman was walking around a wooded road looking for aluminum cans to turn in for money when she approached an embankment where people often dump things from passing cars. She had bent over to pick up some cans off an empty and abandoned lot off the side of Niskey Lake Road when she came across the unmistakable smell of decomposition. It was a road lined on each side by trees, and as the woman came closer to the source of the smell, what she saw would only be the start of a long year of terror for the children and families of Atlanta. There, in the woods, was the body of a young boy. After calling the police, authorities eventually identified the boy as Edward Hope Smith. His friends called him Teddy. Edward, 14 at the time, had been reported missing a week before his body was found in the woods. The cause of death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the back, fired from a .22 caliber pistol, although the bullet was never recovered. While the police who were called to the scene of crime had begun canvassing the area, they soon realized that Edward's decomposing corpse was not the only body they would find that day. Not far away, within 150 yards of Edward's body, was the body of another child, in a state of extensive decomposition. It would become glaringly clear to the authorities that this body had been in the woods much longer than Edward's had, and therefore might have been dumped at a different time. Due to the level of decomposition, it had taken the authorities over a year to identify him, but eventually the body was determined to have been that of Alfred James Evans, who had been reported missing by his mother for a week prior to his body's discovery. He was 13 years old. The cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation. While the police were originally unwilling to acknowledge any correlation between the deaths of the two boys, they could not deny the two things both children had in common. Both were black, and both came from low-income neighborhoods. But for cops in Atlanta, a city looking to build its reputation as a hub for national business, the deaths of two black boys were, as always, inconsequential. Thus, it was quickly swept under the rug, with little effort put into their investigations. However, this was the beginning of a shocking series of unfathomable, brutal deaths that would take place over the next 22 months in Atlanta. The victims were all young African Americans, and as the death toll mounted, so did fear and tension across the city. From 1979 through 1981, a wave of kidnappings and unalivings would terrorize Atlanta's black population. Before we continue on this heartfelt history, don't forget to support our work by hitting the thumb button. Share video with as many people as you can to spread awareness, the needed power, and the consciousness. We do not campaign black histories with the least motive for war or promotion of difference or division, but for the greater unity, acknowledgement, and collective prosperity of every breathing soul under the sun. Let us now get back to the story, starting with this heartfelt interview.
Jesus Christ. Are you scared?
Yes, I am.
Why?
Because like I said, somebody can just grab me anytime. You know, like I could be just walking home one day and somebody can just pull me up like they did the kids. Nobody have no idea where I'm at, you know, like that.
That, sadly, was a young black teenager expressing immense fear about his day-to-day encounter in a community where people having the same skin color like himself are being hunted and killed on a daily basis. This unrelenting terror, the boy said, has put in him and his peer groups some strong character of fear and unsettlement.
Reasonable to be afraid.
Sure, it's reasonable to be afraid. You don't know when somebody just gonna grab you. Like those kids, they didn't know who gonna grab them. They just probably just walking to the store and somebody just pulled them in a car, something like that. and they just dead the next day. So it's reason to be scared.
So are you more cautious about how you behave, and if so, how?
Like I said, I don't stay out late. Like when the sun go down, I go in.
When do you think it'll be over? I mean, what's going to make you believe that they've solved the whole case?
When everybody's caught who is connected with this stuff. When they have announced on the news, we have so many suspects that was connected with the Atlanta murders. That's when I might think it's over. Other than that, to then, that's just me in the house right now.
In the sweltering heat of Atlanta's summer, a sense of dread had crept over the city's black community like a suffocating shroud. Between 1979 and 1981, the unthinkable happened. At least 28 to 30 children and young adults, mostly males and all black, vanished into thin air, only to be found brutally unalived, their bodies discarded like discarded trash. The city teetered on the brink of panic as parents locked their doors, whispered prayers for safety, and wondered which child would be next.
That question, who will be next, has changed the way of life for countless Atlanta children. Each one now has to live with the frightening knowledge that he or she could be the answer.
The Atlanta child unalivings had begun, casting a dark shadow over the city that would take years to lift.
What about the safety in the city? Is it safe here now for the kids?
I don't think it's safe anywhere. You got crime all over the United States. It's not safe anywhere.
But what about here in Atlanta? You got a crime situation here that's abnormal.
Okay, well, they're taking extra precautions and everything, but still, if someone want to get those kids, they're going to get them. They can't watch them 24 hours, and it's just simple as that. The parents have to do their job along with the police and along with the community. It takes everybody involved, not just one person, and not just one task force. They can't do it.
The killing spree began in the summer of 1979, when 14-year-old Edward Hope Smith and 13-year-old Alfred Evans disappeared. The bodies of both boys were found in a vacant parking lot days later, although Evans wouldn't be identified for more than a year. 14-year-old Edward Hope Teddy Smith lived in the Kimberly Court housing projects at 4191 Cape Street and attended Teddy Therrell High. Smith was last seen partying with his girlfriend at Campbellton and Fairburn after leaving the Greenbrier skating rink at 3850 Stone Road Southwest. Some claim that Smith and Evans were at a pot party on County Line Road. Smith was said to have left home 8 days earlier to go to a skating rink, while Evans had disappeared on his way to the skating rink 3 days earlier. The bodies of Edward Hope Smith and Alfred Evans were found in a wooded area across the street from 1881 Niskey Lake Road Southwest by an old woman looking for cans, although Evans wouldn't be identified for more than a year. Although Edward Smith was known to have frequented the house of the aforementioned address to hang out and practice karate, after proper investigations it was discovered that Edward's cause of death was a bullet wound to his upper back. He was found in a black jersey with red letters. His socks and leather sun visor were missing. In a sign of problems to come, the discovery of their bodies didn't prompt immediate panic. The police had quickly written off the killings as drug-related and swept them underneath the carpet. Later that same year of 1979, in the month of November, 2 more dead bodies were found. One was that of Milton Harvey, age 14, which was found on the 5th, and then 3 days later, on the 8th, the body of Yusuf Bell, 9 years old, was found. On September 4th, Milton Harvey had disappeared while on an errand to the bank for his mother. He was riding a bike, which was found a week later in a remote area of Atlanta. His body was not recovered until November of that year. As for the other victim, on October 21st, 9-year-old Yusuf Bell had gone to a store to buy Bruton snuff for a neighbor, Eula Birdsong, at Reese Grocery on McDaniel Street. A witness said she saw Yusuf near the intersection of McDaniel and Fulton, getting into a blue car before he disappeared. His body had been found on November the 8th in the abandoned E.P. Johnson Elementary School by a school janitor who was looking for a place to urinate. Bell's body was found clothed in the brown cut-off shorts he was last seen wearing, though they had a piece of masking tape stuck to them. He had been hit over the head twice, and the cause of death was strangulation. Police did not immediately link his disappearance to the previous killings. In 1980, however, the death toll had intensified. Black children continued to disappear who were later on found dead. All were black, and all were poor. Having no adequate care, most earned money by their wits in the streets, and they made easy targets of themselves by doing so. Several had been said to have disappeared from shopping centers, which they frequented in the hopes of picking up some change by helping people with their bags. Not all but most were street kids from single parents or broken homes. All but 2 were boys, ages ranging from 7 to 16. At about the month of July of the year, 1980, 10 African American children had been reported missing by this time, who thereafter were discovered unalived, in many ways no less than extremely cruel. This included being shot, stabbed, bludgeoned, but most of all, the recent ones have been strangled or asphyxiated. In some cases, the bodies were laid out in full view on their backs, with arms and legs extended. Others have been thrown down an embankment into a river or under a building. The cases were beyond sad. 12-year-old Angel Lanier, for instance, was the first victim to be unalived on that said year on the 4th of March. She had left her house around 4 p.m. wearing a denim outfit and was last seen at a friend's house watching the television program Sanford and Son. Lanier's body was found 6 days later, tied to a tree in a wooded vacant lot along Campbellton Road, wearing the same clothes in which she had left home. A pair of white underwear that did not belong to Lanier were stuffed in her mouth, and her hands were bound with an electrical cord. The cause of her death, like many of the others, was strangulation. But now it has become 5 murders in 7 months, with no word from the police about similarities. This had emboldened the killer. The next stream of murders would happen almost non-spatially. On average, almost every single month, sometimes, even multiple times a month for 14 months straight. On March the 11th, only a week after Lanier's disappearance, 11-year-old Jeffrey Mathis disappeared while on a quick errand to fetch his mother's cigarettes. He was wearing gray jogging pants, brown shoes, and a white and green shirt. Months later, a girl would say she had seen him get into a blue car with a light-skinned man and a dark-skinned man. The body of Jeffrey Mathis was found in a briar-covered patch of woodlands 11 months after he disappeared, by which time it was not possible to identify a cause of death. On May 18th, 15-year-old Eric Middlebrooks would join in the queue of the haunted. He was last seen answering the telephone at home and then leaving in a hurry on his bicycle. He had taken with him a hammer, saying he needed to repair his bike. The police were never able to figure out who the caller was or why Eric had to leave so quickly. His body was found the following day next to his bicycle in the rear garage of an Atlanta bar. The bar was located next door to what was then the Georgia Department of Offender Rehabilitation. His pockets were turned inside out. His chest and arms had slight stab wounds, and the cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. The insane killing would not stop. The black communities in Atlanta had all gone haywire with concern and irrepressible panic. This was death counting with any members of any family. Hunting whatsoever was called a black child out there in the open. There was neither security nor safety assured for any of them. Not long after, on the 9th of June, which had been only 3 weeks following Eric's untimely passing, 12-year-old Christopher Richardson would go missing this time on his way to a local pool. He was last seen walking towards the DeKalb County's Midway Recreation Center in Midway Park. He was wearing blue shorts, a light blue shirt, and blue tennis shoes. His body was not found until the following January, clothed in unfamiliar swim trunks, along with the body of a later victim, Earl Terrell. The cause of Richardson's death was not determined. Later that same month of June, on the 22nd, 7-year-old LaTonya Wilson had followed. She disappeared from her parents' apartment the night before. Her parents had woken up that memorable morning to see the window pane in her room removed, her back door open, and LaTonya nowhere to be seen.
I just want my little girl found safely and brought home. I miss her and I love her.
According to a witness, she had been kidnapped by 2 men, one of whom was seen climbing into the apartment window and then holding Wilson in his arms as he spoke to the other man in the parking lot. On October 18th, Wilson's body was found in a fenced-in area at the end of Verbena Street in Atlanta. By then, the body had skeletonized, and the cause of her death could not be established. The next day, June 23rd, 10-year-old Aaron Weich disappeared after having been seen near a local grocery store at 6 p.m., getting into a blue Chevrolet with either 1 or 2 black men. A female witness says she saw Weich being led from Tanner's Corner Grocery by a 6-foot-tall, 180-pound black male, approximately 30 years old, with a mustache and goatee. The following day, June 24th, Witch's body was found under a bridge. The official cause of death was asphyxiation from a broken neck suffered in a fall. It was clear he had fallen off the overpass, and his cause of death was determined to be positional asphyxiation. But because investigators had assumed Aaron's death was an accident, his case wasn't associated with the Atlanta child murders until the next year. Aaron was scared of heights and wouldn't have been up on that bridge in the first place. The said location was also too far from home for him to be. He was never there by himself.
For one thing, he was scared of height, and he wouldn't have been up on that bridge in the first place, and that was too far from home for him to be. And he never went down there.
The following month of July, 9-year-old Anthony Carter joined the number of victims. Anthony had disappeared while playing with a cousin outside, and the next day his body was found in a warehouse with stab wounds to the back and chest. On that same July, 10-year-old Earl Terrell was added to the list. He was out at the local swimming pool with his friends on a familiar summer routine. But on this particular day, things didn't go as planned for Terrell. He had been kicked out for being caught roughhousing on deck and was seen sadly leaving the pool. But what happened next was uncertain. Somewhere along the path of the pool to his house, Earl Terrell had disappeared. But this disappearance was not like the others the city had seen, because while Terrell's family was busy scouring all the suspected areas possible in looking for their child, they had received a call from what sounded like a middle-aged white man with a southern drawl. "I've got Earl," he was recounted as saying on the phone. "He's in Alabama, and it will cost you $200 to get him back. I'll call back on Friday." But the caller never followed up, and Earl wouldn't be found for another 6 months. This case marked one of the first times that the FBI actually stepped in, as the call in question had suggested a potential federal crime kidnapping, seeing that the child had been taken across state lines. But despite the FBI's involvement, months passed without answers. It wasn't until January 1981 that Earl's severely decomposed remains were found, alongside those of Christopher Richardson, who had disappeared 7 months earlier. Both boys' causes of death could not be determined, but the fact that their bodies had been found in the same secluded location interested the investigators. Although the kids didn't know each other, their remains had clearly suggested that they might have been killed and dumped at the time by the same killer.
We don't know whether this represents a major breakthrough or not. What we do know is that we're giving these cases everything we have to find in one location the remains of 2 bodies that appear to be children, obviously is a very significant occurrence.
The month of August came, and while the police struggled to make sense of the connections, the killer, almost like clockwork, struck again. And this time, it was Clifford Jones. The 13-year-old had disappeared on August 20th, and his body was found on August 21st behind a dumpster in the rear of the former Hollywood Plaza shopping center. Cause of death was strangulation. Darren Glass followed next, age 10, was reported missing on September 14th. Charles Stevens, age 12, on October 9th. Aaron Jackson, age 9, on November 1, strangled, lying face up on a riverbank. Patrick Rogers, age 16, November 30th. The list is in fact endless. The murders had continued all the way into 1981, and all the victims were black. At this point, Atlantan black mothers could not bottle their pains any longer. They've had it up to their necks. Camille Bell, who was mother to Yusuf Bell, Willie Mae Mathis, mother of Jeffrey, and Venus Taylor, mother of Angel, would organize the first meeting of the Committee to Stop Children's Murders, a group that pressured the police to seriously investigate a connection between the cases. But the disappearances kept mounting still. 5 more black children had vanished before the year's end, and 7 other children and 6 adults were killed in 1981. The bodies of some of these hapless victims were found shortly after their disappearances, whereas others didn't surface for months. The racial and class tensions surrounding the murders reflected not only the interracial animosities that had shaped Jim Crow in Georgia, they also revealed long-standing intraracial class divides between black Atlantans.
I come home one particular night, hear a 3-year-old kid walking 9:30 at night in this wintertime. I tell him, I said, "Say, man, where your mom and dad?" He don't know. He really just know his name to tell me. So I said, "Well, come on, man. Me and you'll try to find out where you stay." Now, if I were the killer, it'd been the same thing. This kid come to me because I'm grown, and he think I'm going to help him, not to hurt him.
Atlanta grappled with violent crime throughout the 1970s before the youth slayings began. The high-profile murder of several professionals in the city's central business district had actually attracted national attention, and local residents were increasingly wary of the city's troubled downtown. Despite the threats it posed to the city's profitable convention business, officials struggled to reverse the city's rates of violent crime. At one point, Atlanta even bore the ignominious distinction of being the nation's murder capital. It was on the heels of this crime panic that the first victims disappeared. 14-year-old Edward Smith and 13-year-old Alfred Evans vanished within days of one another in July 1979, and their bodies were discovered in an isolated area of southwest Atlanta later that month. Following the abduction and murder of several more children in late 1979 and early 1980, family members and acquaintances of the victims founded the Committee to Stop Children's Murders. The committee was referred to as STOP. Harnessing organizational and rhetorical strategies honed in the civil rights movement, the STOP organization had petitioned the city government to investigate the murders, but the authorities had responded with an alarming lack of concern and glaring complacence. However, seeing that the outcries of the public was not relenting in any way, the authorities had no other option than to throw their oars into the investigation on the unrelenting disappearances and deaths of the black children in Atlanta. Initially, the first set of cases were linked together. Unfortunately, no common denominator was found between them. Not until July 17, 1980, when the city officials established a formal investigative task force to solve the killings. By that time, it was nearly a year after the slayings of Smith and Evans. 11 young black Atlantans between the ages of 7 and 14 had already been added to the list of the missing and murdered. The FBI's involvement in the case began on June 22, 1980, following the abduction of the 7-year-old girl. The Atlanta Police Department, which, along with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, was investigating the string of killings, asked the FBI if the federal kidnapping statute had been violated. None of the crimes appeared to fall under federal law, but Special Agent in Charge John Glover, the first African American to lead an FBI field office, offered all the support the Bureau could give under the circumstances. The Atlanta office helped follow up on out-of-state leads. The FBI lab provided assistance, and the Behavioral Sciences Unit sent an expert to develop a profile of a possible perpetrator. Meanwhile, the murders continued. Local politicians, the news media, and even Georgia Senator Sam Nunn asked the Department of Justice to permit FBI involvement, and the Attorney General did so on November 6, 1980, authorizing a preliminary investigation. On November 17th, the Bureau launched a major case investigation, devoting more than 24 agents and other personnel to the case full-time. FBI agents joined local and state law enforcement officers on a task force investigating the murders. Collectively, they focused on a dozen disappearances with several shared traits. The victims were all young African-American males who vanished in broad daylight in fairly public locations. Their bodies were found in desolate areas. Their murders had no obvious motivation, whereas 2 other homicides from that period appeared to have been gang-related. The commonalities in these crimes suggested a single killer. The national media seized upon the Atlanta saga as the death toll continued to climb in the fall of 1980. That October, an explosion at the Gate City Day Nursery in West Atlanta claimed the lives of 5 people, including 4 black children. Though investigators attributed the blast to an overheated boiler, many observers remained unconvinced that it was an accident. Given the broader political climate of intensifying anti-black racism, marked by a resurgent white power movement, many poor and working-class African Americans in the city worried that a white supremacist individual or organization might be responsible for the killings. Several observers, including the late novelist Tony Cade Bambara, drew parallels between the Gate City tragedy and the 1963 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, orchestrated by a splinter group of the Ku Klux Klan, which killed 4 African American girls. Others speculated that the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and Centers for Disease Control, which was later referred to as the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, were executing the murders in the service of a broader eugenicist or exterminationist agenda, a notion that seemed more plausible in the wake of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. The administration of Maynard Jackson, Atlanta's first black mayor, also drew the ire of the city's poor and working-class black communities, who accused Jackson of privileging Atlanta's business-friendly reputation over the safety and well-being of its most vulnerable residents. In coordination with white business elites, Atlanta's black leaders focused on protecting the city's image in the wake of the youth murders and on minimizing the potential for civil unrest. Both Jackson and Public Safety Commissioner Lee P. Brown embraced post-racial rhetoric throughout the ordeal, with both men declaring that the tragedy transcended race. After careful post-mortem examination, the victims were found to have something in common: a yellow-green nylon fiber stuck among their head hairs and clothing, leading investigators to believe that all of the killings were connected. The fiber was coarse and tri-lobed in cross-section. The fibers appeared to be those used in rugs or carpets. However, the police were unable to determine the manufacturer of the fibers. And as they desperately searched for the manufacturer of the fiber, a newspaper reported on the significance of the fiber evidence. February 1981, following newspaper accounts of the fiber analysis, the killer began dumping bodies in Chattahoochee River. The victims were now also nude, or nearly so. It appeared that the killer was monitoring media coverage of the killings and modifying his methods to reduce fiber evidence on the victims' bodies. Noticing this, the police initiated surveillance on bridges along the Chattahoochee River in an effort to apprehend the individual responsible for dumping the bodies. The FBI launched a massive stakeout operation, monitoring all 14 bridges from dusk to dawn. It was a large operation, with 72 officers stationed at key points along the river, in hopes of catching the killer in the act. For weeks, the stakeouts turned up nothing but long, uneventful nights. Officers were usually deprived of sleep and exposed to varieties of elements like wild insects and animals, harsh weather conditions and all. And so, during the early hours of May 22, 1981, 4 officers, Gilliland, Holden, Jacob, and Campbell, were surveilling the Jackson Parkway Bridge since around 8 p.m. And at about 3 a.m., police recruit Robert Campbell, who was stationed below the riverbank, heard a large splash below the riverbank. Immediately, he swung into action as he grabbed his flashlight and pointed it towards the river. Then, he saw ripples in the water at the point where the splash had emerged from, yet he did not find any discernible object. He quickly brought it to the notice of the other police recruit, Freddie Jacobs, and asked him if there was anyone on the bridge. After a proper check, Jacobs reported seeing a car heading southbound, close to the edge of the bridge, and going unusually slow. The car, after clearing the bridge, turned to the nearby liquor store parking lot, close to where Atlanta patrolman Carl Holden was stationed. Upon entering the parking lot, the car, without stopping, did a U-turn before heading back onto the bridge. Now being followed by Holden and Gilliland, the white car headed towards the Interstate 285 highway, where it was finally pulled over by the police officers. The man in the Chevrolet station wagon identified himself as a 23-year-old musical talent scout with the name Wayne Bertram Williams. Upon being asked for his ID card, Williams asked, "What's all this about?" And the officers replied that they weren't at liberty to say anything, so he responded,
"I know this must be about those boys."
The police did not reply to him. Instead, they went ahead to ask him if he had dropped anything from the bridge, and he said he didn't drop. He said he hadn't even stopped there. Upon being asked where he was going to at the said time of the day, William replied that he was trying to locate the house of a lady named Cheryl Johnson, who he planned to talk to later that morning about an acting job. Upon hearing this explanation, the officers were immediately confused. Wayne was traveling not to meet Cheryl, but only to find her house, and at 3 a.m., when the meeting was set for 9:30 a.m. that morning. He did give permission, however, for a vehicle search. In his car was a bedspread, a bag of men's clothing, a bag of women's clothing, and a 2-foot-long nylon cord. Having no legal justification to hold Williams, the agents let him go, and he drove on. But when the body of a young African-American boy named Nathaniel Cater was recovered from the Chattahoochee River, a mile downstream of the James Jackson Parkway Bridge 2 days later, more attention was paid to Wayne Bertram Williams. The police obtained a search warrant for Williams's house, and all through his house, it was noticed that different items in the house were similar to the yellow-green fibers found in the bodies and clothing of most of the victims. Investigators also learned that his alibi was poor and that he had been arrested earlier that year for impersonating a police officer. Later, he failed multiple polygraph examinations. In order for this to be conclusive enough to tie Williams to the murders, the police needed to demonstrate that these carpet fibers were not commonly found. Working with chemists at DuPont, the world's largest producer of fibers, FBI analysts pass the fibers through a spinneret. This device stretches fibers, giving it optical properties. This device allowed the FBI to trace the fibers to Wellman Inc., a Boston-based textile company. Wellman had manufactured and sold these fibers to various carpet makers from 1967 to 1974. Because each carpet manufacturer uses its own dyes and weaving techniques, the fibers were traced to a carpet manufacturer in Dalton, Georgia. Over a single 12-month period, the factory had made just 16,397 square yards of carpet, using that fiber in that color, English olive. The police and FBI teams still needed to demonstrate that this fiber was extremely uncommon in houses in Atlanta. The police knew that 16,397 square yards of Luxair English olive carpet were produced and sold through retail outlets in 10 southeastern carpets from 1970 to 1971. However, in 1979, DuPont estimated that 6.7 billion square yards of carpet were carpeted in residences in the United States. The police calculated that the probability of finding a room in a house in metropolitan Atlanta carpeted in that shade of carpet was 1 in 7,792. Although the murderer was thought to be linked to 28 to 30 killings, police and prosecutors decided to focus on just 2 cases, Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne, whose semi-nude body had been recovered from the Chattahoochee River on April 27, 1981. In the latter case, the police also found a fiber on the victim's shorts, similar to fibers found in the carpeting in Williams' station wagon, and also the family dog. The most important fiber, the green Luxair fiber, matched a rug in his home. The purple fiber matched his bedspread. The blue rayon fiber matched a throw that was found in the trunk of his car. Chevrolet provided details on the number of pre-1973 vehicles fitted with this carpet, and from there the police determined that out of 2 million cars registered in the Atlanta metropolitan area in 1981, that only 680 vehicles with this carpeting were registered. Therefore, the odds of the victim coming into contact with this fiber from any other car than Williams's was 1 in 3,828. Experts estimated that 1 in approximately 8,000 Atlanta area homes contained Luxair English olive carpet. Prosecutors used this probability, along with fiber and hair evidence from Williams' car and dog, to establish the fact that there was an extremely small chance that anyone other than Williams could be the killer. Adding to the already damning evidence against him, the killings immediately stopped after Williams was arrested. Although these may not seem impressive enough to convict someone of murder, it was considered that the odds of both events happening, that is, of Payne picking up the fiber from somewhere other than Williams's car, and of Cater picking up the fiber from somewhere other than Williams's house, was 1 in 29,827,776. As a result of mainly the fiber evidence, a jury found Williams guilty of the murder of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne, and Williams would eventually be convicted and sentenced to serve 2 life terms in prison of those murders, and implicated in virtually all of the others, effectively ending further investigation of the crimes on February 27, 1982. The saga's seemingly hasty resolution, with blame placed entirely at the feet of a single African-American culprit, provided a fitting capstone to an investigation governed in large part by the imperatives of the city's biracial power structure. After the verdict, the Atlanta Police Department closed 22 other cases, but Williams was never tried or charged for those crimes. Since that time, some conspiracy theorists have advanced the idea that it was members of the Ku Klux Klan, not Wayne Williams, who was responsible for the killings in the hopes of starting a race war. Though this theory has not been accepted by the courts, an investigation into 5 of the murders for which Williams was not convicted was reopened in 2005. It was closed again in 2006 after the police dropped an unpromising probe into the Ku Klux Klan's possible involvement. Some observers, including the family members of several victims, expressed dissatisfaction with the outcome and doubts about Williams' guilt. One of STOP's co-founders, Camille Bell, had even sided with Williams during and after his trial, calling him the 30th victim of the Atlanta slayings. Questions and conspiracy theories related to the Atlanta youth killings have persisted into the 21st century. In the 4 decades after his conviction, Wayne Williams has continued to maintain his innocence, and the murders have remained a subject of intense public interest, providing the basis for podcasts, academic histories, documentaries, and works of fiction, including Tayari Jones's acclaimed novel, Leaving Atlanta. In light of its enduring hold on the public's attention, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms announced in 2019 that local and state authorities would re-examine the case to determine if select pieces of evidence could be subjected to DNA testing. Till date, the Atlanta child murders remain one of the most haunting chapters in African American history, not just because of the lives lost, but because of the unanswered questions that still linger. For the families of the victims, justice has always felt incomplete. And for the community, the pain never truly faded. In closing, as the shadows of the Atlanta child murders fade into the annals of history, the memories of those lost remain etched in the hearts of their loved ones, a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the imperative of justice. May their stories ignite a beacon of hope for a future where every child can grow, thrive, and dream without fear, and may their memories fuel our collective pursuit of a world where innocence is cherished and justice is served. That brings us to the end of yet another poignant video. Don't forget to support our works by hitting the thumb up button before you. Share video with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening Black narrative, and subscribe to stay tuned in to the channel's every activity if you are yet to. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next one.